Your floor needs to be sanded in stages with progressively finer abrasives for the best finish. Starting with grit 40, then grit 60, and finally grit 100 is typically a good procedure for most wood floors. The goal with the first, coarse abrasive, is to remove the old surface coating and to flatten the surface. Attach the coarse abrasive to the sanding machine. If the machine has variable pressure, set it to high pressure. Make sure the sanding drum is raised from the floor before starting the machine. Start the motor. Slowly release the sanding drum towards the surface. Move slowly. It's important that the sanding drum is always lowered and raised while the machine is moving. Imagine an airplane softly landing and lifting. Start to the left of the room and sand diagonally in the direction of the wood. Walk slowly forward and lift the drum gently as you reach the wall. Lower the drum again and return in the same path that you sanded. Lift the drum and create a new path to the right. Overlap about 5 to 10 centimeters on the previous path. Once the whole section has been sanded, turn the machine around and sand the other end of the room. Repeat this process until the floor is flat and all residues from the old coating have been removed. Always empty your dust bag before it is completely full to ensure the most optimal dust collection. Attach a grit 40 abrasive to an edger and start sanding in one of the corners. Move the machine in small circles, going from left to right. Don't place any body weight on the machine, just let it do the work. Sand until all old coating is gone. Empty the dust bag. Set the drum sander to medium pressure and attach a grit 60 abrasive. Start sanding in the opposite corner and follow the direction of the wood. Move slowly and return in the same path that you have sanded. Check that you have emptied the dust bag. Attach a grit 60 abrasive and sand the edges of the room to remove scratches and smooth the surface. If you plan on filling gaps in the floor with a joint filler later, you'll need some of the wood dust from the sanding. Empty the dust bag and be sure to collect only clean wood dust. Put it in a separate container for later. Now it's time to remove the old coating from the corners. It's most efficient to start by scraping off the majority of the old coating with a scraper. Finish off by sanding with a fine sandpaper. You don't always need to fill the gaps in the floor, but it gives the surface a finer, more professional impression. The joint filler is intended for small gaps between 0.1 to 2 mm and on floors that are dimensionally stable. Shake the Boner gap filler container and mix its contents with the wood dust you collected from the medium edge sanding. Either do this directly on the floor or mix it in a separate container, which might be easier. The typical mixing ratio is approximately 1 part wood dust to 3 parts filler. Try to achieve a consistency similar to yogurt. Pour the mix onto the floor and distribute it with a stainless steel trowel. For best filling, apply diagonally to the wood direction. If the mix becomes too thick and hard to work with, add more filler to lower viscosity. Let dry 30 to 60 minutes. If the gap is large, then the filler may slump. In that case, it will require a second application. Joint filling is not recommended for large cracks, plank or end-grained floors, or parquet with beveled edges. If you have used gap filler, remove any residue left. Do this at the same time as the final fine sanding. Start with the edges, attach a grit 100 abrasive to the edge sander and sand all the edges of the room. Finally, remove the filler and fine sand from the rest of the floor using the drum sander with abrasive grit 100. Sand systematically and ensure there are no remaining filler residues. When you are using oil or hard wax on your floor, we recommend an additional fine sanding to achieve an even finer surface. This is because oil and hard wax oil tend to highlight abrasive scratches. Use grit 100 on the edges and grit 120 for the main surface. A tip is to use an eccentric sander on edges and in front of doorways for a perfect finish. Unlike varnish or hard wax, oil doesn't create a film on top of the wood. This means you wear directly on the wood. Instead, you can protect the floor by filling the pores of the wood with oil. The surface dries out over time as the floor is cleaned. Occasionally, treating the floor with maintenance oil is an important part of caring for an oiled floor. As the floor ages, the maintenance interval becomes less and less frequent. Oil can be applied in many ways. The key is to apply it thinly. In this case, we will use a stainless steel trowel, but you can also use a white rubber-bladed spatula or an oil application sleeve. A buffing machine saves a lot of manual work and lets you buff the surface in a good way. You will achieve the best results by applying the oil in 2 thin coats, letting the oil dry overnight between coats. Carefully vacuum the floor after sanding. You will need a buffing machine, a trowel, a beige pad, cotton cloths, latex gloves and shoe covers. Stir the container thoroughly, especially if you will work with pigmented oil. Start by applying oil with a brush along the walls. Pour a small puddle of oil on the floor and distribute it with a stainless steel trowel. Never leave puddles of oil on the floor for any time. Allow the oil to be absorbed for 15 to 20 minutes. Massage the oil into the wood using a beige pad mounted beneath a buffing machine. Remove excess oil with cotton cloths. Wrap a cloth around a pad and use it with the buffing machine. Allow the oiled floor to dry overnight or for at least 16 hours. Remember to place oily cloths or similar oily material in a bag with water or in another safe place. There is a risk of them catching fire. Apply a second thin coat and wait 15 to 20 minutes before removing any excess oil with cotton cloths. Allow to dry overnight or at least 16 hours before use. You can put furniture back into the room at this point, but wait at least 1 week before wet cleaning or laying carpet.